The movies never showed you what mutants can really do. Every classification, from the weakest epsilon to the world-ending omega. Every secondary mutation that turned heroes into unstoppable threats. Every omega-level mutant ranked by who could end the world. And every transformation that crossed the line between hero and monster. This is the complete breakdown of mutant power. If you thought you knew the X-Men, think again.
In Marvel, every mutant you've seen has the X gene to thank for their powers. But this gene has a form even further beyond the usual enhancements. This is what's known as a secondary mutation, and we're going to go over all of them today. Emma Frost. Her secondary mutation is her iconic diamond form, which is pretty much what it sounds like. She's able to encase her entire body in diamond skin. In some storylines, we've seen Emma tank some really brutal attacks. That includes blows from the Hulk, Cyclops' optic beams, and even a blast straight from the Dreaming Celestial, though it did manage to break her arm. The diamond form is a lot more than just a tough exterior. For some reason, and I'm not really sure how this works, she doesn't need any food or water when she's transformed. She also becomes very resistant to extreme temperatures while in this state, being able to withstand temperatures that would melt or outright freeze most others. There are some drawbacks though. While Emma becomes immune to all kinds of telepathy, this also means she isn't able to unleash her own telepathic powers.
You can stop trying to read my mind, Sugar.
In the films, she's always been able to turn into her diamond form, but in the comics, it's usually a power-up she ends up unlocking. James Hudson. Fun fact about him? He's actually the son of Wolverine and Magda Lenser from the Ultimate Universe in the comics. I know it's shocking, but Logan does end up being a dad. James is a member of Kitty Pryde's new X-Men, although most people just call him Jimmy as a nickname. Jimmy inherited Wolverine's abilities as well. He has the same retractable claws as well as freakish healing factor that pretty much lets him recover from anything. But his secondary mutation is really unique. It gives him the ability to secrete an organic metallic substance which he can pretty much cover himself with. This ability is known as osteometallic conversion. So not only can he heal from pretty much anything, he's also one of the most durable mutants. And yes, he can even cover his claws in the stuff, which essentially gives him metal claws. One difference between Jimmy's powers and his dad's is that unlike Wolverine, his bone claws are natural and not bonded to adamantium. The Beast. Hank McCoy, better known as Beast, was actually one of the first mutants to ever get a secondary mutation, but his didn't come from extreme stress or being in his 20s. In Extreme X-Men, Hank actually undergoes a secondary mutation that causes him to mutate into a feline-like form. In this storyline, Sage basically kickstarted his evolution by activating his X gene's dormant potential. He actually goes through an entire arc where he's afraid he's going to devolve into a house cat. Several mutants undergo secondary mutations, gaining insane power-ups or different new abilities. However, the effect on their psyche can be pretty deep. Beast actually becomes a lot more feral, hostile, and aggressive thanks to his. It's actually a well-discussed topic in the Marvel Universe. Professor X even held a pretty brief panel on the subject at the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore in the second issue of Wolverine First Class. In another storyline, it came from experimenting on himself. While working under Dr. Carl Maddox, Hank isolated a hormone that could trigger advanced growth in mutations. Instead of turning into a cat, Beast actually developed gray fur all over his body. He got a lot more jacked, and his teeth turned into fangs. Plus, he got a massive power amp as well as an advanced healing factor. This was known as Gray Beast. In the X-Men films, Beast's mutations are a bit different. His initial mutation is just agility and feet that can grab things, or surfaces at least. Basically, his feet had grip, just like hands do. You know, the way monkeys grab branches. Beast was working on a cure for mutants, hoping to reverse his own so he could be normal. Instead, when he took it, the serum transformed him completely. This boosted his physical capabilities so much that he could knock out Azazel, who himself was a pretty strong mutant assassin. Gambit. This wasn't exactly named as a secondary mutation, but it was definitely a crazy enhancement, so much so that it deserves a spot on this list. Gambit's original power was the ability to charge objects with kinetic energy. Usually his weapon of choice is playing cards.
Boom.
He could do this with pretty much anything, though the larger the object, the more time it takes him. With most objects, though, it's pretty instantaneous. Honestly, in the comics, he already has plenty of unrelated abilities. Being able to charm people, resistance to telepathy, a healing factor, and advanced agility are just a few of his tricks. We see his enhanced mutation in X-Men 2004. Gambit actually lost his vision in this storyline because one of his playing cards blew up on his face. Not one of his best moments. Just a while after he lost his vision, Gambit developed the ability to see future events through his playing cards. He couldn't see like 50 years into someone's life, but he could see someone's next few moves. Wolverine. One of the most iconic mutants to ever appear in films and comics is Wolverine, famously known for his enhanced senses, busted regeneration, and adamantium-coated claws. What he's also famous for is being a badass, but that's because of his personality, which he actually loses thanks to his secondary mutation. In the Fatal Attraction storyline, Magneto used his magnetism powers to completely rip out Wolverine's adamantium skeleton. Despite his near-unrivaled healing powers, he almost died from this. The loss of his adamantium caused him to leave the X-Men for a while. Before we get into what happens next, here's some basic Logan lore. His adamantium actually poisons him. His healing factor is in a constant tug-of-war between fighting back the effects of the adamantium poisoning and healing him. Now, back to the plot. Once Magneto basically tore Logan a new one, literally, his healing factor went away too. It came back during a fight with Deadpool, after which he rejoined the X-Men. Soon after this, he had to fight Sabretooth, who had escaped from his cage in the X-Mansion and tried to kill Jean Grey, Kitty Pryde, and Jubilee. Logan didn't really like that idea, so he impaled Sabretooth's head, almost killing him. However, this made him a lot more feral, so he isolated himself. Logan's descent into madness eventually resulted in him turning completely feral. He lost his mind and basically turned into an actual animal. This version of Logan was a lot more powerful because his bloodthirstiness was at its complete peak, but it made him a threat to everyone around him. Luckily, he was able to regain his sanity and slowly went back to being a human. Logan's adamantium had the side effect of containing his natural evolution, but without it, nothing holds it back. His claws get longer, his speed and strength increase significantly, and his muscles swell up to insane sizes. Kitty Pryde. Shadowcat is usually introduced as one of the more simple X-Men power-wise. She can phase through solid objects, walls, floors, people, whatever. By shifting her atoms out of sync, she can walk through stuff, mess with electronics, and avoid pretty much any physical attack. Clean, effective, no conflict required. Although, that's not as handy as you'd imagine in some situations. But things get weird. You throw time travel in the mix. In the classic Days of Future Past storyline from the early 80s, we see an older version of Kitty send her consciousness back in time into her younger body. The future she's coming from is absolutely cooked. Sentinels everywhere, mutants nearly wiped out. So this is a last-ditch effort to stop it from ever happening. Here's the important part though. In the comics, this isn't framed as Kitty suddenly unlocking a brand new mutant power. It's more of a one-off solution cooked up by the surviving X-Men. Older Kitty's mind gets sent back, but it's treated like a narrative workaround, not a clean-cut secondary mutation like Emma Frost's Diamond form. Fast forward to X-Men Days of Future Past in 2014, and the movie straight up changes the rules. Now Kitty can actively send other people's consciousnesses back into their past bodies. That's how Wolverine ends up in the 1970s. In the film, this looks like a fully usable, repeatable ability. Basically a brand new power stapled onto her mutation. So, does Kitty Pryde have a secondary mutation? In the comics, It's debatable at best. In the movies? Absolutely. But that version of the power is an adaptation invention. Kitty ends up sitting in this weird gray area where storytelling needs blur the line between evolution and plot device. Iceman. Bobby Drake is one of those X-Men characters people seriously underestimate. On paper, he's just the ice guy. He freezes stuff, makes slides, survives extreme temperatures, classic early X-Men activities. But over time, it becomes very clear that Bobby's powers are way bigger than he ever thought they were. For most of his early career, Bobby believed he could only generate ice and cold externally. He still thought of himself as a human who controlled ice, not someone who could actually become it. That illusion completely breaks during a fight with Black Tom Cassidy in Uncanny X-Men number 415, where Bobby takes a near-fatal chest injury. That's where his secondary mutation starts kicking in. In the films, he just unlocks this power-up. In the comics, his body slowly begins to encase itself in ice. It ends up saving him. At first, this freaks him out. He thinks he might be stuck like that forever. Little did he know, his worst fear was true. During a mission to rescue Nightcrawler, his entire body was completely shattered in his ice form, with only his frozen head left. And despite this, Bobby still came back. He put his body back together using the moisture from the body of an enemy. Bobby eventually realizes he isn't just covering himself in ice. His body is ice. His consciousness no longer depends on organic flesh at all. Everything changes for him once that clicks. He can move his awareness between ice constructs, rebuild himself from ambient moisture, and even exist entirely as a living ice form without a human body underneath. This is also when his power level quietly jumps into scary territory. Bobby isn't just freezing water anymore. He's manipulating moisture at a molecular level. Liquid, solid, vapor, it's all fair game. He can create multiple ice clones of himself and shift his consciousness between them, meaning killing him becomes a lot harder than it already was. The wild part is that none of this came from a new power being added. Bobby's secondary mutation might have kicked in as a survival instinct. It ended up not only restoring him, but also pushing him up several ranks. The guy's an Omega-level mutant, although he really wishes he could turn back human, which, honestly, makes sense. Archangel. Born Warren Worthington III, Angel starts off as one of the more straightforward X-Men. He can fly. He has massive feathered wings. That's his thing. Early Warren is basically the team's air support, and while that's useful, it doesn't exactly scream world-ending power. Then Apocalypse enters the picture and completely wrecks his life. Warren is captured, tortured, and rebuilt by Apocalypse, emerging as Archangel. His organic wings are replaced with razor-sharp metallic ones. His personality becomes colder and more violent, and he's mentally conditioned to serve Apocalypse's agenda. For a long time, this transformation is treated as artificial, something done to him, rather than something that came from within. But later stories complicate that idea. He also gets some nice little boosts to his arsenal. After breaking free from Apocalypse's control, Warren discovers a strange new development tied to his altered biology. His blood now has powerful healing properties. When transfused into someone with a compatible blood type, it can rapidly heal injuries, cure illnesses, and even reverse otherwise fatal damage. This turns Warren into more than just a fighter. In certain situations, he becomes a walking medical miracle. Where this ability comes from is intentionally murky. Some stories suggest Apocalypse's modifications unlocked something latent in Warren's mutation. Others hint that his healing blood might be tied to a deeper evolutionary lineage, sometimes connected to ancient or angelic mutant myths within Marvel lore. Either way, this secondary mutation adds a whole new layer to his character. Warren isn't just a weapon anymore. He carries the ability to save lives at a biological level, which comes with its own psychological weight. Being both a symbol of destruction and a literal source of healing makes Archangel one of the more handy evolutions among the X-Men. Wolfsbane. Wolfsbane's a lycanthropic mutant, which means she can turn into a wolf or a werewolf-like hybrid form, which makes it all the more ironic that she's named after the one thing they're allergic to. Along with that come all the usual upgrades: enhanced strength, speed, agility, claws, fangs, and heightened senses. Physically, she's dangerous. Mentally, it's a bit of a mixed bag. These animal-type mutants really have to deal with a lot. For most of her life, Rana's powers feel more like a curse than a gift. Her transformations are tied closely to fear, trauma, and self-loathing, and she constantly struggles to balance her human identity with her animal instincts. That internal conflict is a big part of her character for years. Her secondary mutation shows up much later, and it's triggered artificially through exposure to a substance called Mothervine. Mothervine is designed to activate or amplify mutant abilities, and in Ron's case, it causes a massive shift in how her powers work. Instead of transforming into a single wolf or hybrid form, Ronnie gains the ability to split herself into a pack of 5 smaller wolves. Each wolf operates independently in the physical world, but they all share the same consciousness. Ron sees through their eyes, thinks through their minds, and controls them simultaneously. This completely changes how her powers function in combat and strategy. As a pack, she can surround enemies, scout large areas, and keep fighting even if one body is taken out. Individually, each wolf is weaker than her usual full form, but together they more than make up for it. What makes this mutation especially unsettling is that it pushes Rana even further away from a singular human identity. Her sense of self becomes fragmented across multiple bodies, blurring the line between person and instinct. It's a power upgrade, sure, but it also deepens the exact identity struggle she's been fighting her whole life. The concept of secondary mutations is one of the most interesting ones in Marvel, but it's also really underutilized. We could really get some crazy superpowers if they explored it a bit more. But speaking of hypotheticals, what's one secondary mutation you've always wanted to see? Share your craziest theories in the comments down below.
Mutants in the Marvel Universe aren't all created equal. From Epsilon outcasts to Omega beings who can literally rewrite reality, you'll finally understand how Marvel ranks the strongest, the weakest, and the most dangerous mutants alive. But here's what most fans don't know. These classes don't just measure power. They decide who society fears, who gets hunted, and which mutants can evolve into something far more terrifying. Epsilon-level mutants, the lowest class. When people imagine mutants, they picture world-ending powers. But the classification system starts at the bottom, and the lowest-ranked mutants are nothing like the X-Men you know. These are the Epsilon-level mutants, individuals whose mutations are usually useless, uncontrollable, or physically deforming. Their powers don't help them in battle. In fact, most of the time, they make life harder. Epsilon mutants suffer the worst of both worlds. They don't have offensive or defensive abilities, and they also can't hide what they are. Elongated limbs, animal features, gelatinous skin, strange growths, or body parts that don't serve any purpose. Their mutations often manifest as disturbing cosmetic changes. They make up almost 20% of the entire mutant population, yet they are the most rejected, feared, and ostracized. While more powerful mutants cause destruction, Epsilons simply exist, and society punishes them for it. Many are forced underground, joining communities like the Morlocks, where mutants judged for their appearance can live away from human cruelty. In the movies, these characters are typically in the background, but a more detailed take is given in the comics, Take Beak, whose mutation gave him bird-like features but no enhanced strength or flight. Or Tommy and Meme, mutants whose abilities are so limited they're practically non-functional. Or Artie Maddox, whose mutation changed his entire appearance and left him able to communicate only by projecting holograms of his thoughts, a power that isolates far more than it empowers. And here's the tension you need to remember: Epsilon mutants didn't just get the short end of the stick. Their very existence shows how cruel and unpredictable the X gene can be. They're mutants in the biological sense, but not in the heroic way the world expects. And that difference shapes how every other class above them is judged. Delta-level mutants. Subtle powers, subtle impact. If Epsilon mutants show us the burden of mutation, Delta mutants reveal the opposite problem: powers that technically count, but don't exactly land you a spot on the X-Men's front line. Their mutations don't drastically alter their appearance, and they aren't useless, but they also aren't strong enough to win a fight on their own. Instead, Delta abilities tend to enhance one specific trait: intuition, luck, intelligence, or perception. Subtle boosts that matter in the right moment but won't turn the tide of a war. In the live-action films, the closest example many fans recognize is Domino from Deadpool 2. Her power isn't super strength, lightning blasts, or telekinesis. It's luck, probability bending. But, in practice, it makes her almost impossible to kill. Bullets miss. Cars crash around her. She walks through chaos like the universe is clearing a path just for her. But even Domino's power has limits. She can't just stand still and expect miracles. She has to move, act, and put herself in situations where luck can tip the scales. That's the hallmark of a Delta mutant. The power isn't the weapon, the person is. Another Delta-like figure in live action is Caliban from X-Men, Apocalypse and Logan, reinterpreted with a non-combat mutation. He can track other mutants over long distances, but physically he's fragile, ill-equipped for battle, and dependent on others for protection. His power is useful, but only in very specific circumstances. Delta mutants are actually the most common type in the mutant population. Half of all mutants fall into this category, meaning they blend into society easily, look mostly human, and often go unnoticed. Their abilities don't shift tectonic plates or summon lightning, but they do give them a distinct edge in survival, information gathering, creativity, or strategic thinking. Gamma-level mutants. If Delta mutants blend in, Gamma mutants do the exact opposite. They can't hide even when they desperately want to. Gamma mutants sit right in the middle of the classification system, but they come with one of the harshest trade-offs in mutant evolution. Their powers are strong, sometimes incredibly strong, but their mutations leave physical marks they can never disguise. Think about Nightcrawler from X2. His teleportation makes him one of the most agile, unpredictable fighters in the entire series. He can vanish in a burst of blue smoke, reappear behind an enemy, or scale buildings in seconds. But the price? Blue skin, yellow eyes, a tail, fangs. Hands and feet adapted for climbing instead of blending in. He's powerful, yet every inch of him screams mutant, even when he doesn't want it to. Then there's Beast, seen across multiple X-Men films. Before he developed a serum that malfunctioned and amplified his mutation, he looked mostly human. But afterward, his intelligence and strength came packaged with blue fur, claws, fangs, and a body that made him look more animal than man. His mutation made him stronger, faster, and smarter, but it also turned him into something the world feared on sight. And of course, there's Mystique, one of the most iconic Gamma mutants ever put on screen. Her shape-shifting is one of the most useful skills in the mutant world. She can impersonate anyone, infiltrate any facility, and weaponize deception in ways most mutants could never dream of. But her natural form? Blue skin, yellow eyes, scales, a look that has defined her entire life. Mystique's mutation literally becomes a metaphor, powerful, versatile, and invaluable, yet marked as other every second she is in hiding. Gamma mutants, more than most, live in conflict with themselves. Their powers are undeniably useful: teleportation, enhanced physical abilities, shape-shifting. Some Gammas can hold their own against Alphas and even Omegas in combat, but the world never lets them forget what they look like. In the films, you also see this struggle through characters like Sabretooth, superhuman ferocity, heightened senses, but unmistakably animalistic. Blink in Days of Future Past, one of the most visually striking mutants with lilac skin and pink hair, whose teleportation abilities are incredible, but whose look sets her apart instantly. Gamma-level mutants highlight a brutal truth about mutant society. Sometimes the most painful part of mutation isn't the power, it's the mirror. Beta-level mutants. If Gamma mutants struggle because of how they look, Beta mutants struggle because of how their powers work. Beta-level mutants are some of the most recognizable faces in the live-action films. They're incredibly strong, sometimes nearly on par with alpha mutants. They blend into society better than Gammas, but their powers betray them the moment they try to live a normal life. But their abilities come with built-in drawbacks, limits, or side effects they can't fully control. And the perfect example? Wolverine. Logan is one of the toughest mutants ever put on screen. His healing factor borders on unstoppable.
You alright?
His heightened senses make him a living weapon. And his claws, whether bone or adamantium, are iconic. But here's the problem: he can't turn any of it off. His healing factor is always active, burning energy, repairing damage, keeping him alive while slowly poisoning him with adamantium over decades. His mutation protects him, but it also tortures him. Then there's Quicksilver, the speedster who became a fan favorite in Days of Future Past and Apocalypse. His power is incredible, moving so fast the world around him looks frozen, But controlling that speed isn't easy. Moving at supersonic levels means the world is constantly too slow for him, and maintaining precision at high velocity is a skill he's still refining. His mutation is a gift, but also a disconnect from everyone else. Next is Gambit, seen in X-Men Origins, Wolverine and Deadpool 3 with Wolverine. He looks completely human, blends in easily, and wields a rare ability, charging objects with explosive kinetic energy. But even he carries the mark of a beta. His red eyes, a subtle but undeniable mutation, reveal what he is the moment someone looks closely. He can hide his powers, but not himself. And of course, the most heartbreaking beta mutant of all, Rogue. Her ability to absorb powers, even life force with a single touch, makes her incredibly powerful. Arguably Omega level in potential, but she has zero control over it in the early films. A hug, a kiss, even a moment of skin-to-skin contact could kill someone she loves. Rogue's mutation isn't a weapon, it's a prison. This is the beta class in a single sentence. They have extraordinary abilities, but the flaws built into those abilities define their lives. They aren't weak, they aren't monsters. They're powerful mutants who constantly walk the line between control and catastrophe. Betas remind us that sometimes the most dangerous mutations aren't the ones that can destroy cities, but the ones that destroy relationships, trust, and the chance to ever live a normal life. Alpha-level mutants. If betas struggle because of what they can't control, alpha mutants are the exact opposite. These are the mutants who have mastered their abilities, refined them, and can blend into society until the moment they decide not to. Alpha-level mutants represent the perfect balance between raw power and complete control. They don't have the grotesque mutations of gammas, they don't suffer the involuntary limitations of betas, and they don't fade into obscurity like deltas. They look human, they act human, but underneath the surface, they are some of the most capable mutants alive. And one of the clearest examples on screen is Professor Charles Xavier. Professor X looks like any ordinary man. No blue skin, no claws, no visible mutation at all. But his telepathic abilities make him one of the most influential mutants ever filmed. He can read minds, project thought,
I don't see you're all dead. Remember.
Freeze entire rooms, and locate every mutant on Earth. All while maintaining pinpoint precision. He chooses when his powers activate. He chooses how far they reach. That level of mastery is what defines an alpha. Another iconic alpha seen in live action is Storm. Her weather manipulation is strong enough to shift atmospheric pressure, summon lightning, create tornadoes, and even control global climates.
Please sit down. I'd rather stand.
Yet she remains composed, poised, and fully aware of the consequences of her actions. Her powers are immense, but they never spiral beyond her intent. She isn't feared because she's dangerous. She's respected because she's disciplined. Then there's Cyclops, perhaps the most misunderstood alpha. In the films, he appears to lack control because of the uncontrollable optic blasts, but according to the classification system, Cyclops is an alpha because his lack of control comes from injury, not mutation. Without the head trauma he suffered as a child, he would be able to regulate his power perfectly. His glasses aren't a sign of weakness. They're the key to unlocking what he was always capable of. And one of the most compelling alpha journeys belongs to Rogue. In the early live-action films, she's a textbook beta, unable to touch another human without hurting them. But in the comics and the classification system, Rogue eventually gains full control over her ability, allowing her to choose when and how she absorbs powers. One of the few mutants who can evolve classifications. That evolution, from cursed to controlled, is exactly what marks the transition from beta to alpha. Other live-action counterparts echo the alpha ideal too. Colossus can shift into metal form at will, then revert back to his human state effortlessly. Kitty Pryde phases through walls without ever losing control or causing accidental harm. Emma Frost switches between telepathy and diamond form with complete mastery. Alpha mutants embody the idea of power without chaos. They aren't the strongest mutants in existence. That title belongs to the Omegas, but they're the most balanced. They can fight world-ending threats, and then walk through a crowded street unnoticed. And in a world terrified of mutation, sometimes the most powerful thing you can be is invisible until you choose otherwise. Omega-level mutants. If alpha mutants represent balance, omega-level mutants represent something far more dangerous: the absence of limits. Omega mutants are the absolute top tier of mutant kind. Beings whose abilities are so vast, so overwhelming, that no one else can surpass them in their specific power category. An Omega isn't just strong, they're the ceiling, the endpoint, the definition of what their ability fully unleashed looks like. And in the live-action films, we've seen glimpses, terrifying, breathtaking glimpses, of what an Omega truly is. The clearest example is Jean Grey, especially in X-Men, The Last Stand, and Dark Phoenix. Her telepathy and telekinesis alone make her one of the most powerful mutants alive, but when the Phoenix Force ignites within her, she stops being a person with powers and becomes a force of nature. She disintegrates people with a glance. She reshapes matter effortlessly. Entire landscapes bend to her will. Jean isn't using her powers, she is the power. That is Omega. Another Omega-level mutant heavily featured across the films, and an obvious one, is Magneto. While earlier stories classified him as an alpha, modern lore and the scale of destruction he causes on screen make his Omega status undeniable. No other mutant surpasses him in magnetism. He can lift entire stadiums, pull structures apart like toys, and twist metal on a global scale. In X-Men Apocalypse, his power literally affects the entire planet's magnetic field. That isn't superhuman, it's elemental. And then there's Storm, who in the comics is officially Omega. Aurora doesn't just control the weather, she commands it. Lightning, wind, pressure systems, atmospheric shifts, she manipulates forces that shape continents. Even in the earlier films, we saw her summon tornadoes, strike with precision lightning, and alter climates instantly. The only thing holding Storm back is her own restraint. Other Omegas hinted at or referenced in lore include Iceman, who in the comics can lower temperatures to absolute zero and manipulate moisture on a planetary scale. Legion, with reality-warping psychic abilities beyond comprehension. Hope Summers, whose power allows her to mimic and amplify the abilities of others. Franklin Richards, capable of creating entire universes, a level of power the films haven't even attempted to portray. They aren't just the strongest mutants. They are forces that bend the laws of physics, rewrite matter, distort time, or warp reality itself. And this creates a unique tension. If Epsilon mutants suffer because they're powerless, Omegas suffer because they're too powerful. People fear them. Governments want to control them. Mutants themselves worry what happens if an Omega loses control for even 1 second. Because if an Alpha can win a battle, an Omega can end the world. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the X-Men universe, make sure to hit like, drop a comment telling me which class you think you'd fall into, and of course, subscribe for more breakdowns just like this. Sometimes the most powerful mutation of all is the one you never saw coming.
For mutants who can barely move a paperclip, to gods who can rewrite entire universes with 3 words, the X-Men power scale goes way deeper than any movie has ever shown you. Storm, Jean Grey, Magneto. You think you know how powerful they are. You don't. And by the end of this video, you'll never look at them the same way again. Storm. To start with, we've got Storm, and to really understand why she sits so high on this list, we actually have to look at the exact definition of what makes someone an Omega. Back in 2019, writer Jonathan Hickman officially redefined X-Men lore in House of X #1 by finally giving fans a strict in-universe definition of an Omega-level mutant. He defined it as a mutant whose dominant power has no real upper limit. It means no matter how hard you measure their specific ability, there's no ceiling to their potential. Now, if we look at the Fox universe, the movies didn't really showcase that all too well. In live action, Storm's treated as a highly effective but localized weather manipulator. We see her coordinating massive synchronized tornadoes to wipe out fighter jets in X2, heavily altering the atmosphere of Alkali Lake and raining down intense lightning barrages against Apocalypse. Powerful? No doubt. She earns that Omega status, which in the films is referred to as being a Class 5 mutant. But when you take your feats from the comics and Hickman's whole upper limit thing, you realize her movie output actually isn't all that impressive. In the comic books, Storm's a literal goddess. She doesn't just make it snow or rain on Earth, she can manipulate atmospheric and elemental patterns on a galactic scale. We're talking about her casually controlling the solar winds in the vacuum of space to propel a spaceship. manipulating the primal elemental energies of the galactic core, and heavily assisting in single-handedly terraforming the entire planet of Mars just to make it habitable for the mutant nation of Araco. The movies gave us a brilliant weather witch, but the comics gave us an elemental heavyweight who can physically bend the atmosphere of entire planets to her will. Jean Grey. As impressive as someone like Storm is, when it comes to Jean Grey, she's just not in the same league. Throughout the entire Fox franchise, she's the only character who was explicitly stated to be a Class 5 mutant. Xavier had to place psychic blocks on her because her telekinetic potential was so extremely massive. Without them, she had a real chance of tearing reality apart. When you look at her actual on-screen feats, it's just one massive feat after another. She casually atomizes Professor X even as he's trying to resist, completely decimates dozens of people, and then single-handedly kills Apocalypse, who had previously ragdolled almost everyone. And that is just her own innate raw power. And by the way, the Phoenix Force isn't why she's an Omega-level mutant. She's classified as that in the comics, even without the Phoenix Force. And with it, she's one of the strongest characters in all of Marvel. But let's talk about just her plain basic abilities. In Grant Morrison's new X-Men run, Emma Frost's indestructible diamond form was completely shattered into thousands of pieces. Jean used her telepathy to essentially download Beast's medical and anatomical knowledge directly into her own brain, and then used her telekinesis on a microscopic level to perfectly reconstruct Emma's shattered diamond body, molecule by molecule. That's godly precision. Then, in the Generations run, she literally knocked Galactus down. A young, time-displaced Jean Grey figured out how to perfectly synergize her telepathy and telekinesis to absorb the ambient psionic energy of everyone on the battlefield. She used that gathered energy to hit Galactus with a telekinetic blow so unbelievably hard that it literally knocked the Devourer of Worlds completely off his feet. While she's this powerful on her own, you can't talk about her without also getting into the Phoenix Force. What happens when that Omega-level brain becomes the perfect host for a cosmic entity? If we talk about raw, terrifying destruction, the classic Dark Phoenix saga gives us the most iconic feat in X-Men history. Driven mad by the power, Jean flew across the universe, submerged herself entirely inside a massive star, and completely consumed its solar energy. She casually caused the star to go supernova, instantly wiping out an entire solar system and billions of lives. But her absolute peak isn't destruction, it's creation. At the end of Grant Morrison's new X-Men run, Jean achieves her ultimate form, the White Phoenix of the Crown. In this state, she transcends physical reality entirely. She is literally shown holding an entire corrupted timeline in the palm of her hand. With a single thought, she essentially burns away the corrupted future, amputating a dying universe and perfectly rewriting reality to save the X-Men. Yeah, there are a few of these reality-altering, almost omnipotent types, and Jean Grey's been one of them for decades now. Magneto. If you look at Magneto's history in the Fox movies, we really got two completely different flavors of his power. With Ian McKellen's portrayal, you had masterful surgical precision. It showed you the kind of extreme control Magneto has over his powers, which is mostly what makes him truly terrifying. With Michael Fassbender, we get to see more of the sheer scope of his powers though, and why they call him an Omega-level mutant. One of the best examples is when he goes for a deep dive into Earth's crust and completely messes with the planet's magnetic poles. He pretty much effortlessly causes global destruction with almost no effort, and that's just something he casually decided to do. Kinda makes you think about what these guys are like when they're out for blood. But the films kind of make it seem like Magneto needed Apocalypse to boost his powers so he could reach that level. But he's never really needed a boost, because in the comics, Magneto is one of the most powerful characters ever. Sure, he's no Rune King Thor or Jean Grey, but this guy is still a force of nature. He has total control over electromagnetism, which is literally one of the 4 fundamental forces of the universe. Let's just look at X-Men number 25, the 1993 one. You think Wolverine's tough, right? Being hard to kill is like his number 2 defining trait, with the first being his adamantium skeleton. Well, Magneto ripped that adamantium skeleton right out of his body, forcing the liquid metal out through Logan's skin. It's absolutely savage. But honestly, his biggest, most absolute Omega-level flex is the Uncanny X-Men number 521. Kitty Pryde is trapped inside this massive metal break-world bullet that's rocketing through deep space at light speed. Magneto, all the way from Earth, goes into a deep trance, stretches his mind across the literal cosmos, locks onto a bullet that is light years away, and physically drags it all the way back home. The movies have a habit of nerfing Marvel's top dogs. Even in the movies, Magneto needs to help take down Apocalypse, and Jean Grey's the one who ultimately does it. In X-Men Omega, though, the entire massive crossover builds to this final brutal showdown between the two of them. Apocalypse is presented as this towering, seemingly indestructible god who has conquered North America. But during the fight, Eric realizes a massive fatal flaw. Saba Noor's body and armor are heavily infected with techno-organic metal. Magneto focuses his power, locks onto those metallic elements flowing right through Apocalypse's bloodstream, and literally tears the immortal mutant in half with sheer magnetic force. Iceman. So, Bobby Drake actually unlocked his powers pretty late. What makes Bobby so unique on this list is that his cinematic journey is an actual multi-movie progression. We watch him slowly level up from a teenager who can just cool down a cup of tea in the first X-Men movie to a seasoned fighter finally tapping into his true potential. By the time we hit the apocalyptic future in Days of Future Past, he unlocks his full ice form, and that gives him a massive boost to his powers, even being able to freeze fire itself. His overall output increases tenfold, and he's able to freeze heavily armored Sentinels too. He ultimately dies here because the Sentinels overwhelm him. Nobody's immune to being jumped, I guess. But despite his incredible powers, he still gets the short end of the stick. The movies treat him as a typical ice user who just shoots cold air out of his hands. In the comics, his powers are a lot more specific. He doesn't just control ice, he controls thermodynamics in general. He can stop molecular motion and manipulate temperature on a global scale. For the longest time, Bobby actually held himself back because he was really scared of his own power. In Uncanny X-Men number 314, Emma Frost's consciousness actually takes over Bobby's body. Because she has no mental blocks, she immediately uses his powers in ways he never dreamed of. She figures out how he can instantly travel miles away by merging his consciousness with a rushing river, and she effortlessly freezes the internal fluids inside a security guard's body just to make a point. It's pretty much exactly the same as when Doc Ock takes over Spidey's body in Superior Spider-Man and realizes just how much Peter holds back. But those are still small-scale feats for the Iceman. In the comics, when the Hellfire Club attacks the New Mutant School, Bobby stops holding back and reveals that he's also capable of cloning himself. He creates a massive army of autonomous sentient ice clones and giant ice golems to fight off the invaders simultaneously across the entire campus. The movies gave us a guy who makes ice slides, but the comics give us an immortal thermodynamic god who can exist in every drop of water on Earth. Cassandra Nova. The freshest addition to the Omega roster is Cassandra Nova. The first time we see her is in Deadpool and Wolverine, and she actually gets classified as an Omega-level telepath by the TVA. Watching her fight, you wouldn't think she's a telepath, but her performance is some of the most visceral telepathy and telekinesis we've seen on screen. She can physically phase through people, including inserting her fingers into someone's skull.
What do you want, Wade Wilson?
Her fingers are inside me, but not in a good way.
We see her effortlessly blow away Wolverine and Deadpool with the flick of a hand, and she dominates the entire void due to her power.
Mummy and Daddy are having a conversation.
Plus, even powerful heroes like Johnny Storm mean nothing to her. She literally ripped the skin right off of him with just her mind, reducing a legendary Marvel powerhouse into a pile of bones in about 2 seconds flat. Cassandra's also the only person besides Kang who has ever been able to tame Alioth.
This has been fun, but the big guy needs to eat and the rent is due. By the way, you're the rent.
She has a really symbiotic relationship with Alioth. She feeds him unwanted variants, and in exchange, he seems to leave her alone. Hell, Alioth is pretty much her personal pet. So here we have someone who can travel anywhere in the universe, tame cosmic entities, and absolutely dog-walk Marvel's top dogs. That's the kind of level an Omega mutant is at. Plus, she isn't a glass cannon either. People like Xavier or Emma, they usually go down in a couple of good hits. When Wolverine literally stabs her through the chest and heart, and Deadpool pierces her with a knife, her telekinesis is so incredibly advanced that she just casually puppeteers her own broken body to snap her bones back into place. She doesn't even look hurt. She can even use sling rings without any real formal training. But to understand why she's an extinction-level threat, we have to look deep into the comics' history. Cassandra is the psychic twin sister of Charles Xavier. She is a mummadry, which is basically a being that acts as a mirror to your own self. They're alien, and they're really weird. The easiest way to understand her is to imagine Xavier's raw telepathic power with none of his moral constraints. Cassandra actually gained control of a fleet of massive, self-replicating wild sentinels in the comics and sent them directly to the mutant island nation. This was known as the Genosha Massacre, and it was every bit as brutal as it sounds. She exterminated 16 million mutants in minutes. By the way, that's more than every MCU villain has ever killed, excluding Thanos and the biggest bads like Kang. Wanda Maximoff / Professor X. Before we wrap this up, we have to throw an honorable mention to two heavy hitters, Wanda Maximoff and Professor X. Wanda's case is really complicated. This is a character whose entire comic history is defined by two things: sheer reality warping power and retcons, and some more retcons. You see, originally, Wanda and Pietro were considered mutants, and Wanda was the child of Magneto. But in a massive retcon that took place in 2015's Uncanny Avengers, it was revealed that she was actually never a mutant at all. Instead, her extreme powers came from genetic experiments performed by the High Evolutionary. Before that retcon, when she was still considered a mutant, she pulled off the most devastating reality warping feat in Marvel history. In 2005's House of M, Wanda suffered a complete mental breakdown, much like her WandaVision story, except this time, she didn't rewrite one small town. She uttered 3 simple words, and in a blinding flash of white light, she altered the biology of every single mutant, instantly erasing the powers of 99% of the mutant population and bringing the entire species to the brink of extinction. Even in the MCU, she is the ultimate reality breaker. In Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, we literally watch her cast a hex on an entire population, rewrite reality, and create a new family from scratch. Then you have Professor X. Even in the movies, he's considered a really powerful telepath. He's got some ridiculous feats too, like freezing an entire museum of people. Plus, when a brain disease makes him lose control of his powers, we get to see just how dangerous he truly is. So, why is he an honorable mention and not an Omega-level mutant? Because in the comics, Marvel officially confirmed that he isn't one. When Jonathan Hickman redefined the X-Men lore in House of X, he published the official Omega Protocol list, which you can see for yourself on the screen. It's established that he's alpha level here. So, sorry Charles, but you didn't make the cut. That still doesn't mean he can't ruin your life though. In the movies, besides Jean Grey, he really is the most powerful telepath on the planet. And if you go into the comics, well, let's just say that when he stops being nice, it's not a pretty sight. This guy once put Magneto in a coma because he was just so done with him. And when I say coma, I mean he entered his mind and completely wiped it clean, leaving him a vegetable. A lot of these guys have so many more amazing feats from the comics, and if you'd be interested in a part 2, I'd love to make a breakdown of the strongest feats of each Omega-level mutant. But from telepaths to literal cosmic goddesses and weather witches, the X-Men are some of the most powerful characters in all of Marvel, with no real limit to how far some of them can go. Over the years, the X-Men have changed a lot. Retcons, recasts, and reboots aside, they've also evolved the X gene that makes each of them mutants. But what does that look like? Well, some pretty sick transformations, not gonna lie. Today, we're going over all of them, including some from the comics you've never seen in Fox's X-Men. Wade Wilson, Weapon 11. We saw the insane, fourth-wall-breaking, part-time mercenary, full-time clown in 2016's Deadpool. But before that, there was another version in 2009's X-Men Origins Wolverine. Wade Wilson was actually introduced as a member of the Mutant Task Force, legendary for pretty much the same things: his elite mastery of twin katanas, and an inability to stop talking deeply seared into his bones. But we never see Wade suit up in his classic colors. In fact, X-Men Origins gave us Weapon 11, which was pretty much a Frankenstein take on the classic mercenary. And this guy's pretty much the opposite of what we know about Deadpool. He's the result of a lot of messy science that pretty much turned him into a guinea pig. His mouth? Sewn shut. None of that timeless biting wit. His eyes? Superman-style laser beams. His powers? Anything between teleporting, retractable elbow blades, and extreme super strength. That's because he's effectively a mutant cocktail, possessing an overpowered arsenal of abilities harvested from other mutants. It wasn't the Deadpool we thought we'd get, but it was definitely up there with one of the weirdest things we've ever seen. Speaking of that version of Deadpool, he actually ends up killing this guy in the post-credits of Deadpool 2 with a nice, clean headshot.
Hey, it's me. Don't scratch.
Guess they added a knockoff version of his classic super regeneration. In the comics, though, his healing factor is no joke. Wade actually became a part of the Weapon X program to cure his cancer, and the idea was getting shot up with a serum derived from Wolverine's DNA. Logan has a top 5 healing factor in Marvel, so it wasn't a bad idea. Except that it never really cured him. Cancer works by multiplying mutated cells, so Deadpool's new healing abilities were locked in a never-ending tug of war, constantly healing his cancer but never curing it. This process also disfigured his face, and that's pretty much his backstory. Robert Kelly. This senator can bend, squish, and squeeze his way out of pretty much anything. But what's ironic is how he actually became a mutant. He's a mega conservative with a deep intolerance for anything with powers. In the movie, he's basically got one goal: to make mutants public enemy number 1 by having them reveal their powers and abilities to a public that doesn't trust them at all. I mean, just listen to the guy's logic.
Expose themselves. What is it the mutant community has to hide, I wonder, that makes them so afraid to identify themselves? The truth is that mutants are very real, and they are among us. We must know who they are, and above all, we must know what they can do.
In the comics, it's more or less the same deal. He's the driving force behind the Mutant Affairs Control Act. Although in some stories, it's his assassination at the hands of Mystique's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants that provokes the Control Act. In the 2000s X-Men, though, he's just abducted by Mystique and taken to Magneto's lair. When Magneto gets his hands on the Senator, he puts him through a machine that triggers an artificial mutation, transforming Kelly into the same kind of creature he's spent taxpayer money campaigning against. Honestly, it makes sense for a guy who hates mutants to end up being one. And what are his powers? Well, it's not really too clear. It seems like he's a human jellyfish. Kelly's body honestly starts to melt into water from what I can tell, and it becomes extremely squishy. He even manages to squeeze through prison bars because of this. Beast. When you think of Hank McCoy, your first thought is the wild blue beast, but that wasn't really his mutation to begin with. It was a transformation he triggered through his research. Hank never liked his original ability, which was basically just monkey feet. While it did give him a lot of speed and agility, it was never something he wanted. His disproportionate, inhuman-looking body made him deeply self-conscious and insecure. And so, he tried to look for a cure, and when he couldn't, he tried to make one.
I don't want to feel like a freak all the time. I just want to look
Normal.
Yeah.
Ironically enough, the serum he developed actually ended up sending his mutation into overdrive. And now, not only was his body far less human than before, but he also had to deal with animalistic impulses. Beast did get a lot stronger as a result, though, but I think he just wanted to take his shoes off and not freak out a potential date. It's a pretty similar deal in the comics. He doesn't actually start as the Beast. During his time as a genetic researcher at the Brand Corporation, Hank isolated a hormone extract that triggered mutations. Thing is, this was a milestone discovery, and a particular coworker, Dr. Maddox, was really jealous of Hank's work. He wanted to steal the research and pass it off as his own. But before he could, Hank drank the serum, and the result is the iconic X-Man you see today. Mystique. When it comes to the mutant world, no one plays the espionage game quite like Mystique. Born Raven Darkholm, she's arguably the most dangerous wildcard on the board. As far as transformations go, well, she's got them all. Her blue skin form is her base, but her true power is in her shape-shifting. This girl can become anyone. From their mannerisms to their fingerprints, she's a one-woman Black Ops unit with an ability that makes her the ideal stealth asset. And to anyone who isn't a seasoned telepath, it's pretty much impossible to catch Mystique in the act. She can even bypass eye scanners.
Welcome, Professor.
Imagine if she turned into Nick Fury. That'd be a day. And by the way, it's not just people. In some adaptations, she can even mimic objects. Her personality is as multi-layered as her abilities because she's constantly shifting allegiances. Earlier, I talked about how Mystique was a part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Mystique doesn't really age like a normal human either. Her shapeshifting constantly regenerates her cells, which is why she looks so young despite being a lot older than anyone else. Archangel. This guy's pretty underrated, even though he had one of the coolest transformations in the franchise. Warren Worthington spent a lot of 2016's X-Men Apocalypse at rock bottom. After a savage underground cage fight against Nightcrawler that pretty much shatters his confidence, the once proud X-Man is reduced to a drunk mutant. What happens after that, though, is pretty insane. Angel grows a pair, literally, and this time, it's not feathers, it's raw metal. This is a pretty serious power-up. He's faster, sharper, and now his wings have several lethal edges. He was always good aerial support, but Archangel's transformation gave him that extra bit of pop that his powers needed. These aren't just stuck to his back either. He can fire off those metallic feathers as deadly projectiles. He has the same powers in the comics, and he's also one of Apocalypse's Horsemen of Death in the movies. There is a big difference though. In the comics, his biometallic wings are also laced with a lethal neurotoxin that paralyzes anyone it cuts. Deadpool. As impressive as Weapon 11 was, it's honestly nothing compared to some of the stuff Deadpool's done on screen and in the comics. His story is the same. Gets cancer, gets experimented on to cure it, and gets horribly disfigured in the process. But the result is a bit different in the movies. His cancer gets cured. Kinda.
No. It's a horror movie.
That happens in the comics too, depending on which storyline you're reading. In the movies though, Wade is a superpowered mercenary who can't be taken down. Despite Weapon 11's deep bag of mutated tricks, Deadpool's own mutations have let him survive anything and everything, literally. And I'm genuinely not exaggerating. This man survived being disintegrated into actual ash. His regen in the movies isn't too far behind that either. Just take a look at this. By the way, just a while later, this guy's already growing another pair of legs. But Deadpool's mutation is unique in more ways than one. Because it's derived from Wolverine's, it actually works with Logan's own regeneration. In Wolverine number 23, they both were pulverized into a pool of blood. And since the blood belonged to both, the result was, well, really gnarly. Both of them survived this and separated. It's not really a transformation, but it's a bit too cool to leave out. Dark Phoenix. We can't talk X-Men without addressing the cosmic nuke in the room, Jean Grey. Her Dark Phoenix arc is easily one of the most legendary storylines in comic history. And that's true for her across the comics too. The Phoenix Force within her is one of the most powerful entities throughout Marvel history. The first time we saw it was in X-Men number 101 when it possessed Jean Grey. And in the comics, it's essentially a sentient force of rebirth that predates even the universe and the darkness that came before. The Dark Phoenix was actually born due to the Phoenix Force experiencing human emotions for the first time, which clouded its judgment. This was an entity of power and destruction, and it was so powerful that when it flew across the universe, it even attracted the attention of eternity. In 2019's Dark Phoenix film, this new power completely shatters her mental barriers. She goes from the team's telepathic anchor to an uncontrollable nuke, accidentally killing Mystique during a violent telekinetic episode. To make matters worse, she gets manipulated by Vuk, the leader of a shape-shifting alien race called the Dabari, who wants to siphon the Phoenix Force to conquer Earth. But let's give credit where credit is due. The movie absolutely nails the visual spectacle of her final evolution. In the final battle of the movie, instead of fearing it and losing her mind like her old self, she actively surrenders to the dark force, weaponizing it to disintegrate Vuk and save her friends. She flies into space, fully embracing the fiery phoenix imagery in a scene that easily lives rent-free as one of the best visuals in the entire movie franchise. Emma Frost. While her original mutation is telepathy,
We'd find you, Henry. There's not a fortress in the world that could keep us out.
Emma actually gets a pretty significant boost in both the movies and the comics. Her diamond form is abnormally strong, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Her skin turns to a complete diamond, making her immune to most blunt trauma, bullets, and for some reason, even telepathy.
You can stop trying to read my mind, Sugar. You're never going to get anything from me while I'm like this.
This also means she can't really unleash any telepathy of her own, though. Maybe brainwaves don't travel well through diamonds? In the comics, she's gone up against some serious heavy hitters, including throwing hands with Hulk in this form. She also becomes self-sustaining, no food or water required, and she can tank up extreme temperatures without a sweat. This makes her one of the most defense-heavy characters in all of Marvel, though her durability still falls a bit short of the actual top tiers. In the comics, this is actually a secondary mutation of hers, but it works as a transformation too, since, well, it's literally a power-up that changes how she looks and fights. Wolverine. Wolverine's known for a lot of things. An adamantium skeleton, extreme regeneration, being a huge jacked man.
Bitch took her. It was my father's obsession.
Get it? Because, Hugh Jackman? No? Okay. But the adamantium wasn't actually something he was born with. No, that was something he got as a result of the Weapon X experiments. Logan was captured and experimented on like a lab rat, and his skeleton was coated in adamantium along with intense brainwashing that almost drove him feral. This actually prevented Logan's actual transformation, since it overloaded his healing factor. Without it, well, Logan's mind doesn't really hold up, and we actually got to see this happen in 1995's X-Men number 25. In order to stop Magneto from killing Quicksilver, Logan attacked Magneto, but using his magnetic powers, Magneto actually ripped out all the adamantium from Logan's skeleton. This sent his healing factor way past its absolute limit, and it took Jean Grey and Charles Xavier holding his body and mind together just to keep him alive. The result was that since the adamantium wasn't there to keep his regeneration at bay, Logan actually de-evolved into a much more feral version of himself. So that's technically Wolverine's transformation, but honestly, it doesn't help him. Sure, he's faster and slightly stronger, but he loses his sanity completely, and he becomes a threat to everyone around him. Plus, in this form, his claws are actually made of bone. Well, that's it for every mutant transformation so far, and some of these are really out there in terms of crazy. What's one you'd like to see? Personally, I hope that we get a feral Wolverine one of these days. It'd be one of the goriest things in Marvel outside of the Punisher.